Alright, this is our last section in Chapter 8. We are talking about today measures of temperature. So looking at measures of temperature, and this is something we all talk about, especially when it's cold out or it's really hot out or one or the other. We're talking about how hot or how cold. Well, that is temperature. It's just a measure of how hot or cold an environment or an object could be. And when you talk about objects, you could talk about your food, you could talk about something like that, and the environment would be how hot or cold is this room, is your house, is the outside. Degrees is the measurement unit for temperature. So when we're talking about temperature, we're measuring it in degrees. And there's two different types of that. One is the Celsius degrees, which is the metric system of measurement. So we don't use that one as often. You might see banks or other kind of billboards or whatever using degrees Celsius, and they'll switch between that and degrees Fahrenheit. The one that we use most often, so when you look at the Weather Channel or you look at your phone or whatever that is, it's going to be in the Fahrenheit system, which is the customary system of measurement. So those are the two different system of measurements we'll look at. And again, most of what we'll be dealing with is in Fahrenheit degrees. So when you're making estimates and things, I don't expect you to be using Celsius because we haven't worked with that or you haven't known that very often. So I just expect you to be looking at Fahrenheit degrees. Just to give you kind of comparison, I'll talk you through this a little bit. Normal body temperature for Fahrenheit would be 98.6 degrees, where Celsius it's 37 degrees. So there's a formula that you use that we're not going to discuss this year. But it is something you'll get into in either Math 7 and probably the Sciences next year. And then water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, but then it's only 100 degrees Celsius. And water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's at 0 degrees Celsius. So the Celsius system kind of bases it off of water boiling and freezing point. So water freezes at 0 and it boils at 100, or with Fahrenheit, that's at 32 and 212. So you see there's a bigger range there. Celsius has less degrees but covers more area than Fahrenheit does. So let's go ahead and take a look just at a few examples of estimation and determining what makes more sense. And like I said, we're not going to look at the Celsius measurement, we're just going to look at Fahrenheit. Okay. So we're looking at example number 1. So warm bath water. Would it make more sense to be 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 105 degrees Fahrenheit? So when we think about those, our normal body temperature is around 98 degrees. So 75 degrees is actually going to be very cold to us. Not very, but 20 degrees cold to us. So the one that makes more sense here is actually going to be that 105 degrees because it's warmer than us. It's going to bring our body temperature up a little bit. Okay, let's look at another one. Inside a classroom. And this one is in Celsius, so they do use it a little bit in these estimation, or in these guessing ones. So inside a classroom, is it going to be 21 degrees Celsius? Or is it going to be 84 degrees Celsius? And again here, think about the fact that water freezes at 0 and boils at 100. So which one of those is going to make more sense? 84 is really, really hot because 100 degrees Celsius is 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you think about how close 84 is to 100, that tells you how high, and that's going to be like over 100 degrees, well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that one's going to be really hot. So we're going to be looking at using 21 degrees. Even though 21 seems close to freezing for us, or it's under freezing, in Celsius that's actually way more normal of a temperature to look at. And then if we're looking at, let's say, a glass of iced tea, is it going to make more sense for it to be 5 degrees Celsius or negative 25 degrees Celsius? Again, think about that boil or that freezing point of water. With water, it freezes at 0. So if I go all the way down to negative 25 degrees Celsius, it's going to be a frozen glass of ice. It's not going to make any sense for that to be way down there. So we're going to choose that 5 degrees Celsius. Alright, and one more example to get through. Alright, so I'm going to put 3 things up here, and I want you to estimate what you think a good estimate of temperature would be. And then I'll give you answers. So the first one is an outdoor swimming. It says give a reasonable estimate of the temperature in degrees for the situation. So it asks for both Fahrenheit and Celsius. Go ahead and try the Celsius. I'm not so worried about Celsius, but I'm more worried about the Fahrenheit one. So 1 will be outdoor swimming. 2 will be the temperature in a refrigerator. And 3 is going to be the temperature of hail. And hail would be the little ice pellets that fall during a bad storm. So what do you think the good temperatures would be for each of those? For outdoor swimming, you don't want it to be too cold out when you go. You don't want to go when it's 50 degrees, but then you don't want to be too reasonably hot either so you get scorched. So I would say for degrees Fahrenheit, maybe anywhere from 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit for that, which would be approximately 30 degrees Celsius. So that might be a good reasonable for them for that. In a temperature in a refrigerator, you don't want it to be freezing, so you don't want it below 32, but you do want it pretty cold in there. So I would say probably 35 degrees Fahrenheit is a good one for that. And then in Celsius, that means it would be close to about 2 degrees. Because again, you want it close to freezing, but not freezing. And the temperature of hail. It's cold enough that it's freezing, but it's not so cold that it still is precipitating. So as long as something's falling from the sky, that means it's not like negatives Fahrenheit-wise. So this is probably anywhere from like 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and probably about negative 1 degrees Celsius. So make sure you have those copied down, and we will do the homework tomorrow in class.